Fetto, and this is On Reflection, the beauty podcast with a global view on beauty, in association with Kate Somerville, clinically inspired expert skincare that visibly transforms skin with minimal downtime. A little later in Talking Points, I'm discussing Hair Power, Me and My Afro, Emma Dabiri's Channel 4 documentary with journalist and Season Z founder Felicia Pennant. First, required reading, beauty news, topics and features that have caught our attention. Sharing her thoughts on AOC blending makeup with politics and ageism in broadcasting is Phoebe McDowell, assistant editor at Bureau 24, formerly at Sunday Times Style and Grazia. Phoebe, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So I would love us to start with the AOC story, featured in Jo Ellison's column in the Financial Times. And she talks about how AOC has basically used her love of makeup as a political tool. She also talks about the fact that a woman's love of makeup is seen to diminish her intelligence and her capability to do her job simply because she loves, a bit of highlighter or lipstick.
The intersection of beauty and politics will never not fascinate me. The fact that beauty and brains are not mutually exclusive. So the crux of the piece is that AOC unapologetically loves beauty, and it's so seamlessly become such an integral part of her identity. And I don't think that you can say that about any other politician. She doesn't shy away from the fact that she wears and that she loves it. So for this new gen political powerhouse, and this is what Jo really gets across in that piece, what an important message, an impactful message to young girls and indeed women. Society tells young girls that they can choose between looks or books, and women somehow in the workplace are thought to be vain or vacuous and therefore unable to be taken seriously in their career because they like to brush up their brows or, God forbid, contour. And it sounds so basic that we still keep having to reiterate these things, but it's so depressingly true.
I think it's a brilliant thing that we're unpacking that right now. For generations, it is something that a lot of women felt that they had to almost become quite manly and not showcase a love of makeup or a love of things that are seen as very feminine in order to go toe-to-toe with men, especially in the workplace. And a lot of women have felt that if they show a love of makeup or a love of fashion or any of those things that are seen as frivolous in modern society, then they would just not be taken seriously enough. And it would mean that they wouldn't be able to climb up that career ladder as easily as they may have done if they show themselves in a different light. I mean, I think it's fascinating how Hillary Clinton for so long has been a stalwart in politics. She was a woman that you would respect, even if you didn't agree with her policies. She's obviously a really accomplished, intelligent, brilliant woman. And yet the column inches were dedicated to her hair.
It's funny you say that. Jo Ellison actually lifts a quote from Hillary Clinton's memoir in the piece where she says that she spent 600 hours in the makeup chair on the campaign trail. And she says the few times I've gone out in public without makeup, it's made the news. So she couldn't have had the luxury not to have done her makeup because it would have deflected and dominated to such an extent that it would have been of detriment to her. But I think what's interesting about AOC is that she's flipped the narrative and she's owned it.
Do you think the reason why she's been able to do that is because we're in a different time and she's of a different generation? Because AOC is what? She's 30? I think that where it's been so difficult for other women is probably a generational thing. It's an age thing. So for a long time, we weren't really in a climate or an environment where we could feel comfortable as women wearing bright red lipstick and contouring and having a bit of shimmer, like you were preoccupied, and I put that in inverted commas, preoccupied with your look, because it was seen as vanity. And for a lot of people, if you come across that way in a workspace, especially if it's very male dominated, you know that their idea of you will be diminished and you won't be taken seriously. So I'm wondering whether this is, yes, down to age, and also maybe in terms of the space and the platform she occupies. But perhaps that is something that is more difficult for someone who, say, works in an investment bank where it's predominantly male, quite pressurizing in that sense, perhaps they wouldn't necessarily feel the confidence to be able to do that.
To my mind, Congress would be as daunting and predominantly male and full of baggy suits and saggy skin as any investment bank. And to go back to your point about, is it different because she's a different age and in a different era? Like, she is fluent in social media and she has such an assuredness about her when she uses it. I'm sure that she has this juggernaut PR team behind her who, when she's approached about doing things like Vogue beauty tutorials, somebody in that team might say, oh, you know what, like, I'm not actually sure that this is the best thing for you to do right now, because it might deflect away or it might undermine what we're trying to talk about, what the main issue is that you're campaigning on right now. But she's decided that something that so many would deem a bit trivial or even inane, that is not my view on it, she's decided that this tutorial is an important part not only of her schedule, but of her identity. She's kind of got this unwitting influencer vibe about her, outside of the more produced examples of, I don't know if you saw Netflix's Knock Down the House documentary that followed 4 women of colour running for office in 28. But the opening scene of that is AOC in her mirror, in her very modest looking flat, and she's shown to be dampening her beauty blender and applying her powder to bake her contour in and make sure it stays the day. And it's this refreshing relatability that Jo makes really clear of in the piece. She's got this unwitting influencer vibe about her. So outside of the produced examples of Netflix's Knock Down the House and outside of the Vogue tutorial, she incorporates beauty into her every single day on Instagram. Not only that, she shares her skincare routine, but she's also making soup and she's repotting her houseplants. She shares so much and breaks all the rules of how a politician should act, but unlike Trump, in the best way. You know, she has just such a shrewd understanding of what will resonate with her audience. I often think it must be so hard for her because on the one hand, you know, she's universally adored by modern women, but by God is she up against it with her critics. She is such a punching bag for the right. But by being vocal about her love for beauty, she owns the narrative. So she does it to them before they can do it to her, because whatever criticism they can launch at her, they will. So before they're able to prettify her or sexualize her, both of which would undermine her, she openly talks about how much she doesn't care about it and that beauty is such an important part of her life and that it enables her to feel confident and to feel powerful. And they are so riled by seeing an attractive, adept, capable young woman succeed. You know, she's the youngest ever woman to be elected to Congress.
I think she's phenomenal. What she does is so powerful. We have always known, you know, a lot of us who work in beauty and write about beauty, we've always known that beauty is not this superficial, idiotic, inane thing that women are preoccupied with. It's not about vanity. It's so much more. It's so layered. And it's a powerful tool. There's so many elements of makeup that shape so many things around you, not just how you feel about yourself, but also how you present yourself and the messages that you send out with all of that. So we know that beauty is so much more complex than a lot of people will make out. But I love the fact that she is using her platform to send out this incredible message that actually you don't need to distinguish my love of makeup from my level of intelligence and how well I do my job. That's a brilliant message to send out, especially, as you say, to really young girls, because certainly with me growing up, I knew that there were certain spaces that if I walked in with a bright red lip or, you know, a winged eye or, you know, a bit of shimmer or whatever, I know that I won't be taken seriously. I've walked into boardrooms for beauty companies where we know that beauty companies are predominantly dominated by men. And you walk into certain boardrooms where you're talking to people who are incredibly powerful and incredibly influential, and they are the ones who dictate where our beauty industry is going. And you walk in there and you're actually wearing some of the products that they sell. And the irony is that they look at you like, are you serious? You're here to speak to me. You know, I'm in my suit and I'm suited and booted and whatever. And there you are in your huge afro and your blusher and your winged eye and your mascara. And for some reason, they don't take you seriously, which I just find ridiculous. So I think that when you have someone like AOC who is using her platform which is a huge platform, and she has a very powerful job to do. And she's doing that brilliantly. When someone like her is able to say, no, 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 it's okay. You can wear your makeup, you can contour, you can do this, and also be in a situation where you're influencing the way your country is run. I mean, that's pretty incredible, isn't it?
Firstly, let me say that that anecdote is so disconcerting and frustrating and galling that people have the audacity to look at you in such a way that makes you feel in a room other. It's so crazy to me. I think she obviously, in so many instances, as a young Hispanic woman, especially in Congress, has felt other. But for her, her lipstick and the fact that she is able to sell out that lipstick in a matter of minutes, for her, her difference is her power. And that's what cements her brilliance. And that's what we should all celebrate.
Absolutely. So that leads us nicely, actually, to Afua Hirsch's piece in The Guardian. She talks about issues of lookism, the fact that women are judged, especially within the broadcasting industry, they're judged on their looks and they're sized up against a certain standard of beauty, which is completely unrealistic and stemming from the male gaze. And it leaves women, as they age, completely out in the cold. What inspired you to choose this story?
It goes back to this age-old bias that women have to simply endure the media's fascination with and condemnation of their appearance. And it's how long are we going to define a woman's value and employability by how young or attractive she is? We know that this happens in tons of different industries and that it's rife in so many. So she cites 3 women who were shown the door by the BBC on account of their age, presumably, though not, of course, officially. Those women were Libby Purvis, Sue Barker, Jenny Murray, and they all sit in their late, mid 60s, late 70s. And what I find so baffling, but not at all surprising, sadly, is if you look at their male counterparts, people like John Simpson, John Humphreys, David Dimbleby, I mean, they're all in their late 70s, early 80s. They've got 10 years on these women. And it just strikes me in this piece, especially, that women just really are served up for public consumption and critique in a way that men aren't. And the hypocrisy that women become surplus to requirement while men become these revered, sacred kingpins and they're at the top of their game is so frustrating. Afua says the ridiculous idea that women become socially, professionally, or aesthetically redundant after a certain age has not gone away.
The funny thing is, me reading that piece, I didn't feel shocked.
No.
And that's sad to me and that's terrifying to me. I should feel shocked that we're still having these conversations. I should feel that we should have moved on from this by now. But the BBC, by not necessarily having women who are of a certain age or disposing of them officially or unofficially because they're seen as past their sell-by date, that is reflecting society. Every part of society that we look at reflects that, where women of a certain age or women who don't ascribe to a certain beauty standard are suddenly not good enough and they're traded in for a new model, as it were. Look at the beauty industry. How many mature models do we have? When we have a woman of a certain age on a cover of a magazine, people celebrate that like, wow, this is incredible. This is amazing. It should be one of those things that actually it's just normal, whether they're older, younger, whatever. We should be celebrating them regardless. Just because they're of a certain age doesn't make their skill set or their brain redundant. So it's a continuous conversation, but it's not just the BBC. It's literally mirroring life. It's mirroring everything that we see around us. I do think that women are under so much pressure to live up to a certain aesthetic and ideals. I'm looking at girls who are in their 20s already having preventative aging treatments, the Botox, the fillers, injectables. So many women are having that. Why is that? There's a pressure to look a certain way. And also, I think our obsession with youth is problematic. There is so much that is said about the youth being the future. The youth is everything. The youth are going to change everything. Well, does that make everybody else redundant? I think we have to be careful in the way that we canonize youth A 70-year-old was a youth once. Does that mean that just because they're no longer a youth, they are redundant? We are complicit, actually, in some of this. We laud youth like it's absolutely everything. We just need to be a little bit more balanced.
Completely agree. I think we are complicit in a sense, and Afua even touches on that herself. She often wakes up earlier than she needs to ensure that she looks as fresh, as good as she can. And of course, there is nothing wrong. So many women want to look the best that they can. But I think you do have to look at these patriarchal standards of beauty and ask yourself how that translates to what we consume every day and what we're used to seeing on the television. In the piece, she says early on in her career, she overheard a senior male broadcaster speaking about his female colleagues, saying that she was eating herself off air.
I read that and I thought it was so appalling. I had to read that line a couple of times because I just thought it was so appalling.
It's such a nauseating, unnecessary, pointed, chauvinistic comment. But unfortunately, it speaks largely to what we see on our TV. We, no doubt, internalize this misogyny as well, because predominantly on television, we're seeing young, slim, predominantly white women. Broadcasters act like their viewers need to be protected from the sight of older women. These people are the best at what they do. They've got decades of experience, insight, wisdom. It's demeaning and it's sexist to show these women the door. But not only that, it's such a huge loss of talent.
A lot of these issues are usually attributed to the patriarchy. I absolutely agree. However, I also think at some point, we women also have to take a level of responsibility. I have worked with a lot of women who have the power and the authority to make certain decisions that amplify women of a certain age and amplify women who do not fit into Eurocentric or unrealistic global beauty standards. And they have shied from making those decisions that lift up women and show a representation of women that is normal and is real. And that's women making the decision. There are women who are in high positions in the BBC and lots of other organizations. And I guess my question is, what are they doing to broaden the representation of women in those spaces? How are they working towards women's voices being heard? My experience is I've seen a lot of women who are in positions where they could make those changes and they could push certain things forward, and they choose not to. I remember wanting to shoot an older model. The comeback that I got that was quite negative about me wanting to shoot an older model all came from women. They didn't come from men. They came from women. So there is something about aging that terrifies women. There's something about seeing a woman in a certain light that terrifies a lot of women, but they don't admit it to themselves. And we blame it all on men. And I think that, yes, that is a huge issue, but I think we need to start thinking about and looking at how much of a part we as women also play in that situation. Until we start to engage with aging as a very natural and normal thing and not something that we should be afraid of and something we should fight, then I don't think that we're going to see the changes that we really need to see.
I agree. I think we all too often, myself included, lean on this idea of internalized misogyny and lean on the patriarchy. But I think it's up to us as well to push for that change.
Absolutely. Phoebe, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's time for In Praise Of. This is a section of the show where we laud the merits of a single beauty product. This week, it's Kate Somerville's Delicate Recovery Cream. There's a couple of reasons I used to sideline products for sensitive skin. Firstly, I just found the formulas were not particularly sophisticated. They were all really quite basic. And then also, to be fair, I didn't really consider my skin sensitive. I always say my skin's as hardy as a cactus. But things do change. I mean, I still wouldn't consider my skin sensitive per se, but goodness me, it's had moments of feeling sensitive, especially really recently. It's felt raw, it's felt inflamed, it's felt irritated, it's just felt not very nice. Yeah, to be fair, part of it is my fault. I do overdo it sometimes. I overcleanse, I overdose on like retinols and acids and so on. I overlayer. And yes, I am a beauty editor and I know I should know better and I do know better. But you know what? This is what happens when trying beauty products as part of your job description. What it has taught me actually is that sensitive skincare is not just for people with sensitive skin. But for me, I need something that works, which is where Kate Somerville's Delicate Recovery Cream comes in. It's a kind of SOS cream for the skin. It's got peptides and ceramides, and it soothes and calms skin. And it helps to restore its protective barrier. It doesn't have any fragrances in it, which I know for a lot of people with sensitive skin, fragrances are a complete no-no. This is completely fragrance-free. It's got lots of other ingredients in there that help to reduce irritation, like honey, green tea extracts, and ginger root. And then the texture is amazing. It's like really creamy, really indulgent. It kind of makes you feel like you're wrapping your skin in a protective blanket. So yeah, if you have sensitive skin, this is epic. If you don't have sensitive skin, this is also still epic. If you have skin that is irritated because of all the stuff you've been doing to it, and listen, I'm not trying to make anyone feel guilty here, but basically you want something that calms your skin and stops it freaking out, then yeah, this is it. Now, talking points. This week, my guest is journalist and Season Zine founder, Felicia Pennant. Today, we're discussing Hair Power, Me and My Afro, Emma Dabiri's fascinating and incredibly moving Channel 4 documentary on the cultural weight of Black hair. Felicia, welcome to the program.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
We watched this and I know we both loved it. It was not just fascinating, insightful, but it was also incredibly moving. I found it quite emotional talking about the beauty and the history and the cultural relevance of Black hair, and also intertwining lots of experiences from not just Black women, but Black men. And we don't see that very often.
I really agree with that. Hearing stories of Black men and also inside and outside of the barbershop, I thought was incredibly interesting. I was just basically watching it and being like, yeah, I relate with that. Yeah, I relate with that. Yeah, that's happened to me. What was great about it was really comprehensive. It really touched on things that are really relevant now, the salon and the natural hair movement. I just felt like it was so well researched, beautifully shot. The kind of scenes of the different interviewees in the studio was beautiful. The guy with the really kind of dynamic locks was brilliant. I could relate to a lot of it and really kind of thought back about my own hair journey now that I'm 29 and like all the different things I'd been through, and hearing people talk about their experiences at the salon and the rituals of it and that sense of belonging and the meanings that your mum and your grandmother and your siblings and your family attributed to hair. The nuances were fascinating.
I mean, there were so many standouts in that show. It was so Moorish. There was a woman with short hair. She had a short fro. She talked about her hair journey, and she talked about always having her hair straight and relaxed. And she talked about when she had the big chop and how she realized that she hadn't seen her own hair for, 17 years or something. And she suddenly saw her coils and she saw the real texture and she saw her hair as it actually grew out of her scalp. It was a really powerful moment when she described that, because there are a lot of women who now have natural hair who'd chemically straightened their hair for so long. They recognize that moment when you suddenly think, oh, so this is my real hair. And she also talked about someone who admired her natural hair, but said, oh, but I don't know if it'll suit me. And she said, but it will suit you because it's yours. And that really resonated. I thought, well, yeah, there's so many women who are so terrified of rocking their own natural hair. I think it's a journey in order to feel comfortable enough, because we have had to be in environments that are anti-Black in many ways and Black hair, they've been quite hostile to the texture of our hair, seeing it as unprofessional, unruly, unkempt. So a lot of women have been afraid to show off their hair in its natural state. I wanted to know what your hair journey has been.
Mine is probably a little bit different to most in the sense that I've never permed or relaxed my hair ever. It's just something that my mum didn't do for me and my sister when we were younger, which seems strange for a Nigerian parent because a lot of the other Nigerian kids in my primary school, like they had hair and it was so long and straight and smooth, and we just never did that. We always had braids. I remember the beads very fondly. Extensions, like plaited extensions and braids. Then I experimented with weave and then decided I hated that because I'm a big gym person. I hated not having access to my scalp and that patting of the head that you always end up doing when your scalp is too hot and itchy. And then into uni in St. Martin's, I started with a weave and I went back to like really, really long box braids, like thigh length. And that was my look. And at the moment, I am a boho locks person. I've kind of been doing that for the last few years.
So with all of that, did you never, ever, even as a child or even as a teenager, feel that pressure to straighten your hair? For me, there were so many subliminal messages around that really purported the idea that longer, straighter, more white behaving hair was better. So I certainly felt that pressure, and I know a lot of people around me did. And I think your mum's incredible that she didn't bow to that. I know a lot of mothers back in the day. I mean, you would see some really, really young girls with relaxed hair. I didn't relax my hair till I was a teenager, but there are a lot of girls whose hair was relaxed much earlier because it wasn't seen as good hair or it was seen as tough hair. And I guess those generations felt the pressure to subscribe to a certain hair type that was seen as more superior. I'm curious to know how you didn't feel any pressure at all to straighten your hair.
I did that or felt like I could do that through a weave. It was never about altering my natural curl pattern. But I was like, if I really wanted to, I could put a weave on, or I could just get plaited hair or like plait extensions onto my hair. And also on the flip side, I just heard so many horror stories about relaxer and perm and your hair falling out and burning your scalp. And I think my mum loves telling the story of how when I was younger, I was definitely a person that hated the process but loved the results. I really don't like hair salons. I love, I guess, being there, the atmosphere is great, but because I'm so particular about my hair, salons are distracting for everyone. Like the woman doing your hair is having a great time. Like obviously you're talking to her, but she's eating, her kids are there, she's talking to somebody else, which means that she's not focusing on my hair. I've had people cough on my hair. I've had people burn my scalp. I've had horror stories in salons. They've been distracted because they're trying to fit me in because their other client is here and they've taken too long. Or because, particularly with single plaits, they do the root and then they had some other person to finish the ends of your hair. So it's not the same all the way through. And that irks me, particularly how long you spend there and how much money you spend.
Black women will giggle at that because we've all had that crazy experience where you go to, a crazy salon and, you're not getting the full attention and there's lots of other people there and there's lots of different things going on and it's quite chaotic. But the funny thing is, well, first of all, there are salons, black hair salons that are not like that. And they do give the service and you are out of there at the time that you hope to be out of there. I do think that those salons are much more prevalent than they used to be. That's one thing. But also, I think there's something about the black hair salon for me that is a really beautiful thing. Yes, it's chaotic. Yes, it's really mad. And anyone who doesn't really understand the culture of black hair salons would think, what on earth is going on here? But, there's something quite beautiful about it. I think it's the way it brings a lot of black people together. It's the way it enables you to unclothe a certain part of yourself that you wouldn't necessarily unclothed in other spaces because you are with people who share a similar sort of dialect with you in many ways. You know, there is no code switch in there. There is just something about your culture that is shared and it's unspoken, and there's a sisterhood and something that is just so magical that can't really be replicated in any other space. Yes, they can be incredibly frustrating because most black hair salons you go to, you cannot go there and clock watch. You can't go there and be in a hurry. You just can't. Our hair takes time, and that's fine. I've come to live with that. I think it's a beautiful space.
I think it is, but I think I probably enjoy it more when it's not me getting my hair done. You know, I've definitely had some fun moments there. I try and be like the first person that day. That's the trick, like be the first person, be there at opening so that when it starts to get busier, you're kind of almost done. Yes, no, I agree. Yeah. I think it is a great meeting point. It's lovely. It's so great to kind of talk about what's happening back home, depending on who's in the salon that day. But yeah, I think it's just my personality. Like I want to make it as simple, but as efficient and straightforward as possible.
I'm suddenly sort of craving that really old school traditional hair, but sort of modernized in a way. Takes me back to my childhood because I spent 5 years as a child in Nigeria, and some of my favorite memories are going to have my hair done, and whether it's having it threaded or having it cornrowed or whatever it was, I'd always loved having my hair done. One thing I wanted to go back to when you talked about wigs, if we go back to the show, there was, I think it was maybe the final scene or maybe one of the final scenes where there was a lady there. Her name escapes me, but I know she was a wig maker. And when she talked about being in the midst of these other women who she felt really comfortable with and comfortable enough that she could take off her wig and show the world that she was bald underneath. I thought that was powerful. I mean, I was moved to tears. It was a really powerful moment.
Yes, it was really unexpected also because I didn't think that was where the conversation or the program was going to go. Yeah, it was so powerful just to see her when she was like, this is the first photo of me smiling without my wig. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is incredible. Wigs are interesting. Watching my grandmother's, so my other grandma's Jamaican, and she used to wear wigs, and watching her put hers on and then watching my other grandma wear her wigs. And I think of how far we've come in terms of wig innovation with lace fronts and closures and all these terms that I really didn't know about until a couple of years ago, that everyone is rocking and they look so natural unless you kind of know the telltale signs.
The whole wig culture is fascinating to me, actually. I do love the way that it's completely blown up. And there's always this argument about wigs as something that perpetuates the idea that Eurocentric Caucasian style hair is better and it's the North Star, as it were. And so you get a lot of people who criticize Black women wearing wigs because it's not natural, it's not their natural hair, and it's usually kind of straight, or you know, it's rare that you get a lot of people wearing sort of wigs that look like natural hair. It's usually straighter hair. And my response to that is, I think the wig wearing situation has completely changed now. Certainly back in the day, you know, maybe a few decades ago, when Black women were wearing wigs, it was about style and it was about fashion. And it also was, to a degree, about emulating a certain look that you would see much more on white women. Then it took a different spin and became about fashion. And I think that's the whole thing now, for the most part. I don't think that people are wearing wigs necessarily to emulate white culture or white beauty standards. I think it's just become part and parcel of the Black culture. we change our hair. That is part of what we do. We're like chameleons. We're constantly changing our hair. I mean, goodness me, I'm a little bit lazy now, but back in the day, I used to change my hair like every week. There was something new going on. I spent so much of my time and so much of my student loan with my hairdresser. I mean, we were like, I mean, honestly, I spent a lot of time in that chair because I was just all about the hair and all about how wonderful and so glorious and so versatile and so brilliant our hair is and what you can do with it. One of the things that I really loved about Emma Dabiri's documentary is, in some ways, I mean, I love my hair anyway. I love my hair because of the weight of it, the history of it, and everything that comes with black hair and the struggles that come with black hair. And maybe one can say the burden that comes with black hair. I love it for that. And this documentary reminded me yet again of that and made me kind of fall in love with black hair all over again.
I agree with you. I think, like I said, I'm probably never gonna put chemicals in my hair because I want it to stay in its natural state. Like you said, the history of it, the struggle of it. But I do think that things like wigs, protective styles, it's a fashion thing, but it's also a convenience thing. A wig means that your hair is done. So you can go out and do what you need to do and just secure it on your head and go. But you can also take it off if you want to. And so there's a freedom with that. My mum actually now just shaves her head, and I'm always inspired by that. She carries it off beautifully. The girl you mentioned before, when she said that the first time she went to the barber's and shaved her hair, and she's got it beautifully shaped, and it's very, very tailored and very stylish, and definitely represents her personality. There are so many Black women that do shave their head that are more visible, or they have their hair short.
I think the whole thing with, and I've seen a lot of that, like you say, a lot of Black women completely shaving their hair off. And I think that's incredibly liberating because I think we can be guilty of almost putting too much pressure on ourselves to have our hair in a certain way or to have the length, to be obsessed with length. There is an obsession constantly with length. You see all those YouTube videos, Black girl, long hair. And I think, well, why can't we just have hair that is healthy? This whole thing about good hair and the curl pattern and all of that, it's all nonsense. Essentially, good hair is healthy hair. It's not about length. It's not about your curl pattern. It's just about your own hair and how healthy that hair is. One of the things that the program touched on that is so relevant is hair discrimination. We still see that quite a lot, and quite a few people in the documentary talked about their experiences of hair discrimination and certain hairstyles not seen as professional and not seen as neat, and therefore you feel excluded from certain spaces or not comfortable in certain spaces because you're made to feel uncomfortable. One of the girls actually talked about working for a particular department store. And when she turned up at work, she was told, we can either take you to grooming or we can ask you to leave. And I thought that was unbelievable. I'm sure it wasn't so long ago. And I know a lot of work has been done. I know Emma's doing a lot of work to try and make hair discrimination outlawed in this country, like officially outlawed in this country. And I just wondered, for you who has always worn your hair naturally, have you been in certain situations where you've maybe not explicitly been told, or maybe it's been implied that your hair is not professional enough or it doesn't fit the mold?
Off the top of my head, nothing immediately comes to mind. I mean, I guess I've also been lucky in the sense that I've always kind of been in more creative environments where your look, your makeup, your hair, your clothing is expressive. It's your mood, how you're feeling, your personality. I mean, I've still had people, randomly coming up and touching my hair.
Ooh, don't get me started with the touching hair situation. Oh my goodness. I have people who have touched my children's hair in public. Yeah. we'd go on the train before Corona stopped all of that. But I've had people literally just reach out and start touching my children's hair. It's a really difficult one because you are so shocked that you would think that you turn around and say, how dare you touch my child's hair and how dare you do that? But you're so shocked, you're numb. If I did the same thing to a white child that I've never met or don't know, and I went up to him and I touched his hair and I stroked his hair and I fiddled with his hair, I mean, I'd probably get arrested.
Yeah, it's really true. I can't believe that it's still happening. And you're right. I think when it's happened, I've always just been in shock. And if I've been able to compose myself, it's just like, don't touch my hair. Like, and people are shocked. I'm like, how dare you just lean over into my personal space and do that? I do think, though, being tall helps me sometimes because people are less likely just to kind of lean over if I'm taller than you. You're not just going to like do that. But some people are quite brazen. Or I think an interesting development in that is also like just now when I go to the airport earlier this year before Corona, when I went to Basel, like they checked my locks to check that they didn't open because apparently people smuggle things in through locks and through hair. And I was like, wow, this is new. To be fair, they didn't just put their hand in there. They were like, hi, can we just check your hair?
That is awful.
When you hear horrible stories about how people of color are detained in airports, like it was like unpleasant, but I swiftly went through security and was into duty free fairly quickly because they were satisfied having been through my hair.
Did they do that with everyone sort of around, or were you taken into a room for that to happen?
You know, when they have the scanner, they did it. It was like a woman that did it and she had gloves on and it was fine. I was just like, do you know what? You've explained clearly what you're doing, why you're doing it. You haven't just randomly put your hand in my hair. I don't know what to say. Like, I just want to get through on my holiday. So I'm just like, do what you need to do so I could go. That's kind of my stance with things.
But what's interesting is the number of things that we turn a blind eye to because we've always had to.
I agree with you.
And we just swallow things because really, you know what? That's kind of not okay. That's really not okay.
I know that you're right. It's just literally if this is the terms for me to be able to go on my holiday and pass through here without further delay or further interrogation. And she did it in a polite way. Like she didn't just fling my hair out. She did it really gently. I didn't mess up my hair also because I feel like if she messed up my hair, there would have been more of an issue.
I'd love to know what your favorite part of the show was.
I think it was the guy talking about his locks and how they do what they want and they have that arrangement. I guess the way that he told his story was so compelling, but also just him like moving around his locks. Some of my aunts, my Jamaican aunts on my dad's side have locks. They wrap up. I remember it being fascinating watching my aunt put on her headscarf and wrap up her locks and being amazed at how long they were. So I think that made me think of that. And also, again, hearing a man talk about his hair and it not just be about the barbershop culture, which is really interesting in itself, but just something else and how he could just do what he wanted, the freedom he had with it and what it meant to him. I think that really resonated with me.
Yeah, I thought that was lovely. I love that he has been going to the same barber for 21 years and that's never changed. He talked about how important and how powerful that relationship was because he's had lots of other relationships in that 21 years and yet he's only ever had one barber. And I thought that was really powerful. That relationship between you and the person who does your hair, it's quite a special one. I remember speaking to Charlotte Mentzer and she talks about hair as being a spiritual thing. When someone puts their hands in your hair, it is really spiritual. So yeah, like you, I think that was definitely one of my favorite parts. I love what Emma Dabiri said about Afro hair. She said, Afro hair is making a comeback and it's taking up the space it deserves. You know, I'd like to think that Afro hair never went away, but it is wonderful to see it getting the recognition that it definitely deserves. It's a form of activism to have your natural hair simply because of the culture around Black hair and the history that comes with Black hair. So for me, just watching this and seeing this documentary celebrate that was just such a beautiful thing. I sent a message to Emma while watching the program because I was so moved by it. If we consider how Black hair has been demonized and marginalized for so long, when we really think about that, we understand the importance of programs like this.
It's nice to have a resource beyond books and literature and words. Something like this really emphasizes nuance. And I think that this idea of nuanced Black experiences is so important for people to remember, because you don't want people to fall into the trap of generalizing the Black experience because it is so nuanced. This documentary is just a brilliant celebration of that. You could hear the similarities, but also the differences and how they navigated it in their own personal way and in their lives. So hopefully the jumping off point is watching that, learning and understanding, but also, you know, talking to people and understanding that, yes, what you've seen is insightful, but it might not be exactly the same for the Black people around you. She definitely focused on really timely, current, important things that hopefully sparks really useful and productive action as well as conversations.
I think it should be mandatory watching. Over the last few months, we've talked a lot about people being allies and how to be anti-racist. And I think watching this program is a great way to understand Black hair, Black culture, and seeing Black hair in a different, fresh, new light. So I would recommend everyone watch Hair Power, Me and My Afro, Emma Dabiri's incredibly moving Channel 4 documentary. Thank you so much, Felicia.
Thank you for having me.
And that's it for this week. Huge thanks to my guests Phoebe McDowell, Felicia Pennant, and this episode's brand partner, Kate Somerville, and to you for joining me on Reflection. On Reflection is a Battersea Podcast production.